time for video time with Jodi. Do you guys recognize that little girl? That's actually me when I was pretty young, probably around 4 or 5 years old. And when I was 4 or 5 years old, one of my favorite guys in the whole wide world was my grandpa. My grandpa Stan. He was awesome. I loved him so much. I'd go over to his house all the time. I hung out there tons because we lived in the same town, and we would hang out in his garden, and he'd teach me all about like growing vegetables and what that meant and stuff, and we'd pull weeds together and we'd eat carrots together, and it was awesome. And he'd also tell me about these stories about Billy the Buffalo and his kids and the adventures they had, and I loved it. It was like the best time. And unfortunately, my grandpa got a bit older and then he got sick and then he died. And when somebody dies, it just means that their body stops working and you can't talk to them anymore. And that actually made me really, really sad. I think it's important to talk about being sad and what we do about that. And I think there's actually a story in the Bible that can also teach us a lot about being sad and helping sad people. So let's start to talk about it. For the next month, we're going to be talking about the story of Ruth. And that's the Ruth that's in the Bible. Now, I have a friend named Ruth. Actually, I call her Ruthie. And she has some great stories too. But that would be kind of weird if we were just talking about Ruthie for the month. So we're going to talk about the story of Ruth from the Bible. Not Ruthie, Ruth from the Bible. And if you guys want to look that up in a Bible, it's actually in the book called Ruth. So that's the story we're going to be talking about for the next few weeks. But to start the story, we actually need to start with a woman named Naomi. And Naomi is married to a guy named Elimelech. Now, that's a funny name. It kind of sounds like you're sneezing. Elimelech. Woo, sheesh, woo. But yeah, so she's married to this guy named Elimelech, and they have 2 sons, and their names are Mahlon and Chilion. Those are weird names too. But anyway, so the family, there's Naomi. She's married to Elimelech, they're the mom and the dad, and then they have 2 sons named Mahlon and Chilion. Now, they were all living in a town called Bethlehem. And the problem is that lots of people in Bethlehem didn't have enough food, and they were getting really hungry, and they're looking around going, there's nothing to eat here, so maybe we should move. Maybe we should leave our friends and family behind, and the 4 of us should go to a different place and find some food. So the 4 of them decided to move to a different place and went to a place called Moab. So most of us are from Calgary. This is kind of like if we went from Calgary to Edmonton. If we were looking around Calgary and we're like, yo, we're hungry, and Edmonton's like, hey, come here, we have burgers for you. So the family then moved to Moab, and in Moab, something sad happened, and Elimelech died. We don't know what happened. The Bible doesn't tell us, but something happened, and he died. So while they were in Moab, Mahlon and Chilion were like, yo, not only are there burgers here, there are beautiful women. We should get married too. So Mahlon ended up marrying a woman named Orpah. Now, you guys are maybe too young to even know who Oprah is, but if you know who Oprah is actually named after Orpah. Fun fact. And Chilion married Ruth. So that's who the story is about, and this is how she ends up in the family. So now we've got Naomi, Elimelech has died, but Mahlon is there with Orpah, and Chilion's there with Ruth. Now, something else bad happens, and we're not really sure what, but both Mahlon and Chilion end up dying too. So now we only have Naomi and Orpah and Ruth left. So Naomi's really sad because her husband has died, her sons have died, she's moved so she doesn't have a lot of friends in Moab, and she's going, you know what, maybe I'm just going to move back. Maybe I'm going to move back to Bethlehem, which is where I'm from and where I know people, and I think I'm going to do that. So she's like, I'm going to go back. And then Orpah was kind of like, I am from Moab. I don't really want to go back. So again, this is like if she's like, I'm from Edmonton and I don't really want to move back to Calgary. Like, is it okay if I stay here? And Naomi's like, actually, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And she's like, Ruth, do you want to stay too? Because that makes a lot of sense. And Ruth is like, no, 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 I'm coming with you. So Orpah goes back to her family, and Naomi and Ruth end up going to Bethlehem together. So that leaves us with Naomi and Ruth. They're the only ones left of the family, and they're pretty sad about that. So sad that Naomi actually changes her name, and she's like, hey, I want everybody to call me bitter. And I don't know if you guys know what bitter means, but she's basically saying, I am sad, I am angry, I don't like all the stuff that's happened, and because of that, I want you to call me bitter. So it's kind of like if I was so angry, I was like, you know what, don't call me Jodi anymore, just call me angry. That's how bitter Naomi is. She's just like, call me bitter, yo. And Ruth is like, okay, but Naomi, no matter how bitter you are, I'm going to stick it out with you. I'm going to be your friend. Like, we're going to do life together now, and I'm going to help you out no matter how sad and lonely you are. And that's the beginning of the story of Ruth. Come back next week and we'll talk about it more. See you guys next week.